Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and welcome to episode 3 of Kulna Tuhaf. Today I have a special guest with me, and before we dive any deeper into anything about her, I'm gonna allow her to introduce herself, what you do, where you're from, and who you are.
Inshallah. Thank you so much for having me. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Amina Abuzaid. I am a Libyan poet and writer from the UK. I also have a separate career in translation and communications. So I write in a sort of varied poetic style, different topics, not necessarily following like one specific checklist or fitting one mold in both Arabic and English. Although you could say that my first love or sort of initial writing experience will always revolve around Libya and my cultural experiences.
Cool.
So yeah.
So how did poetry become a part of your life?
So my sort of passion for writing definitely started when I was very young, even though that does sound quite cliche. My granddad, my mum's father, was an avid reader and all around creative, Allah rahmah. So my mum would tell me stories of how he would come to visit us in the UK when I was maybe like 2 years old, sort of carrying paintbrushes and colouring pencils, and he'd play and paint with us. My mum also used to write poetry herself, and so I believe my creative streak is definitely generational in that sense. So inshallah, I'll be able to pass it down myself.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
So where did it come into your life exactly? Like it started from when you were a child, but where in your life like حسيت إن لازم تكتبي ولا لازم تديري حاجة creative?
So throughout my school life, I had other interests, like all mainly creative, like photography or painting. Obviously those took a backseat, and so I would always have writing on the side. But yeah, I carried my writing with me all through school and university. I picked it up more after uni, so branching out into spoken word and longer pieces of writing that helped me develop my confidence. But I've always, like, I can't pinpoint one specific time, like a specific situation that happened to me and I sort of thought, okay, I need to vent, I need to write that down. It's always sort of been there, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I've always sort of had it on the side literally as long as I can remember. So yeah.
So writing was always your strong suit, pretty much.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
So
although so in GCSE, so in middle school, I never really liked English, like most sort of young teenagers, students, like they hate writing essays and that kind of thing. Yeah. So I was always sort of that kid. I wasn't really into English, but alhamdulillah, I had a really good teacher who sort of always encouraged me. And you know how teachers always pick on the quiet students. He was never that. Like he would never sort of pick on me. He'd always sort of quietly encourage me and be like, you know what, she's quiet, but that's how she's flourishing. That's how she's thriving. Like that's her strong suit. So I think that really helped me find my love for like writing. And yeah, that's how I sort of branched out after that.
So what's your process when for your poetry? Like how do you come up with your words? How does everything come about into a poem?
There isn't really one single sort of rigid process for me to gather words. It's always changing. So usually I have to be in a quiet space. I'm either reading or thinking about not necessarily personal situation, but like something that's either happened to me or that I've read, maybe sometimes something political. And I just start writing. So I never stop to edit. Whatever comes to my head, I just put it down. And sometimes, actually most of the time, it won't make sense whatsoever. But I come back to it the day after or a few hours later, and I just sort of piece it together. Other times I literally just write one line and I give up. Like it's definitely an emotional roller coaster.
Like it's sometimes one word is enough, or a couple words is enough, right?
Yeah, literally, yeah.
Is it difficult, do you feel, when putting different things together? ولا like حسب الموضوع?
Definitely حسب الموضوع. Sometimes like it's quite difficult to answer that because I'm not necessarily like topic oriented. Like I
Right.
literally write whatever comes to my head. And sometimes it depends on my mood. Like I'll be in a good mood and I'll be like, okay, I want to write something a bit more uplifting. And it, like I said, the words, like I could be in the mood to write, but the words won't come to me straight away. So I'd have to do sort of anything. Like I'd have to like pick up a book or like water my plants or like go outside and take a walk, like, or talk to someone to sort of build that inspiration. So yeah, it literally, it depends on the moment, on the situation. Yeah.
So, leading on to the next question, what are some of your inspirations? Like, you read some things, you see some things. Is it mostly emotion based when it comes to inspiration, or
Um, I mean, yeah, poetry is a very sort of emotional genre, I believe, but
right?
it's not always the case. So I like to be inspired by my surroundings. So it's not necessarily something I read. So it could be like people I'm interacting with, daily routines, like I said. So everything is my muse in that sense. But um, so I think I think my sort of main inspiration going back to how I started this journey is me recognizing that there's not a lot of known young Libyan poets who are also women.
Mhm.
And I sort of wanted to use that creative space to encourage a breakdown of like dated conventions and be introduced to like a bigger talent pool and hopefully be a part of that talent pool
Right.
of up and coming writers. So I think that's what really pushed and motivated me to sort of keep writing, and to not be silenced or to not like quieten my voice just to fit into a certain mold. Um, so yeah.
Are you finding difficulties finding inspiration now with the world being as it is with COVID والمشاكل اللي صايرة في العالم, whether it be in Libya ولا برا?
I mean, in terms of the current climate, like the political landscape sort of fuels me, if that makes sense. It's sort of
Mhm.
what inspires me to write. In terms of whether it's sort of writing about المشاكل اللي صايرات ولا just looking at the opposite spectrum of that, so looking at the positives and just sort of trying to not necessarily defer from the situation, but to try to get people to look at the, you know, the positive side of things. And like for example, in the mashakal, like in the political climate that's happening in Libya right now, it's sort of um, it's sort of important for me to talk about that, yes, but
Right.
also to show like the richness of Libyan heritage and, you know,
Culture.
to talk, yeah, to talk about our history and all of that. So yeah, in terms of like my creative flow during the pandemic, it's definitely, you know, my writing definitely took a hit, and it took quite a toll on me as well. Because I felt like I was literally in that space, in that moment of time where I was building momentum, and I felt like I had finally reached a strong place with my writing. So for a while, I was like feeling uninspired, but I think I had to sort of keep reminding myself that this was just a temporary pause, and to just keep doing what I do, and just connecting with loved ones and doing all of those kind of things that sort of remind me of why I started this journey to begin with.
What are some difficulties, like leading on to that, what are some difficulties you feel that you face as a writer, whether it be through your blog or through your poetry?
I think getting my message across tends to be a worry of mine a lot of the time, like whether my readers will understand what I'm writing, and then sort of leading on from that, like how to break down that barrier, which sort of hinders my writing process a little bit. But I think at the same time, the wonderful thing about poetry is that it is quite abstract and ambiguous in meaning. Like there isn't one simple answer or impression to be taken away. So each person that reads my poem will have their individual view. I think I like the fact that the writer's sort of reasoning behind their writing and thought process is sort of like a private affair, and they can choose to keep it to themselves if they wish, or they can choose to share it.
Right.
But yeah, I think my like sending a certain message and people not quite grasping it is sort of a worry maybe of other writers as well.
Yeah, like when I go and I try to look for questions through your writing, and I
Yeah.
found it like it was very like لما تقراها حسب الشخص اللي يقرا فيها. And that's usually with poetry most of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one thing that I've realized, that there's no common theme between all of your writing. It's more of like everyday. مرة على ليبيا، مرة على شخصيتك انت، مرة, you know.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, do you feel like it was difficult to bring Libya and Libyan culture into your writing, ولا حسيتها انها كانت سهلة جدا؟
Oh, definitely not easy. I think my relationship with Libyan culture, our Libyan culture is very beautiful, but also it's real and important to say that it's a complicated one. So I'm always torn between writing from a political perspective, like I said earlier, or sharing my dual identity experiences, discussing the revolution and its aftermath, or focusing on the positive aspects of our culture. But I think, like I said, I've come to terms with the fact that it's okay to do both. Like, you can shed light on the forgotten stories and the individuals that have sacrificed their lives for their country, but to also include sort of the music, the clothing, the language, everything that keeps us grounded when we're so far away. So I wrote a post a while back on my blog about El Bedla Al Kibira and sort of my very personal and special connection wearing it on my wedding. And I think having that, and then having sort of, a poem or a piece about, even though I didn't necessarily go through the struggle of, living through the revolution, I've heard stories from my loved ones, and I've witnessed them sort of struggle and suffer, and the pain is like unmeasurable. So I think having both sides of that and sharing that world it's always difficult to speak on that, especially when you're sort of part of the diaspora. But it's especially difficult when you have loved ones living in that situation, and putting that into words is never easy.
Especially when you go back and see it for yourself.
Exactly. Yes.
Like, you're from Masrata, I'm from Masrata too. So like seeing the aftermath, it hits different. Like, there's الشعور مش قادر, you can't really put it into words. There's emotions that you can't really express, even as much as how good you are in writing. There's some things that are just very, very difficult.
It's so painful, and like you said, like, as much as I'd want to, like, I have like created pieces on the revolution in the past, and I've just scrapped them or put them in the bin, because I was like, that doesn't do it justice. Like, half the things that I want to say, I can't put down on paper.
Right. Do you have to see it for yourself? لازم تحس الشعور بروحك.
100%. Yes.
So how important is it for you to use writing as a tool for self-expression? Or how does that mean to, or what does writing as a tool mean to you?
So back when the whole coronavirus pandemic started, because it was like an international lockdown, everyone was stuck inside. So that alone is, it took a toll on a lot of people's like mental well-being. But I think sort of adapting with that and adjusting with that, and then sort of finding, small things in my daily routine to just enjoy. The only thing that I kept sort of returning to, or one of them, one of the few things, was my writing, because it was the only thing that I could sort of rely on when I needed to vent or just give my thoughts an escape when I struggled to express them out loud. So I know it might not sound like it, since I probably sound like I'm talking a lot, but I'm not I'm not like a speaker, I'm more of a writer. And if I'm put in a situation where I'm not prepared, it's not like I struggle to come up like with the right words, if that makes sense. So having my writing there is very important, and it's helped me through a lot of situations.
Do you feel it's easier to express yourself in Arabic ولا أسهل بالإنجليزي؟
أنا تو قاعدة ندرب إنجليزي. لكن writing in Arabic will always be my favorite form of expression.
Really?
Because it's definitely not easy. Like, even though we've sort of, as children, alhamdulillah, we are raised to love the Arabic language, both for the Quran and for conversational use. But it's still not easy, sort of, because we've we've grown up in a foreign environment where English is literally like shoved down our throats. It's not just English language, by the way, English history, English, like everything. So it's definitely difficult sort of writing in proper like the Arabic, the standardized Arabic dialect, because it's a very beautiful but complicated language. So and that, in a sense, that's why I like to use it, because if you notice in my recent posts, I haven't written, or have written but haven't shared it publicly, like my Arabic poems. And that's because I never think they're quite good enough. Like with English, I can just write it and post it, but with the Arabic poetry translations, it's sort of, it means more to me. So it always has to sort of be perfected in a way. So in a way, my poetry is like a celebration of my linguistic journey so far, because dabbling in both languages means I stay true and connected to who I am and my purpose as a Muslim living in a foreign country. Exchanging my identity or like selling out my principles to seem relatable or to fit in with the mainstream, like, could never be my goal.
بالعربي, like, is it easier to write Libyan Arabic ولا فصحى is a lot easier?
Fusha is a lot easier. I think I struggle to sort of speak Libyan Arabic, never mind write it. But I have read like a lot of books by poetry by Libyan writers, and sort of not just sort of Arabic writers, but just Libyan poets. And like I said, that's sort of what I got from my granddad. Like I remember going to Libya and just going through his like books, and he had so many like oldies, like so many old that probably a lot of people don't know exist. And that's, I think, why another reason why I treasure my culture so much.
Are you finding it difficult juggling being a mother and finding creative outlets?
I think that's an interesting question, because I think my creative difficulties are not necessarily always bound to motherhood. So it's always like a combination of things, especially when you factor in a national lockdown, like mentioned. Although getting accustomed to like a new routine did definitely slow things down a little. But yeah, I think finding the time is also important to do whatever, like not necessarily just my creative sort of not for my creative journey, just for my creative journey, but I think to adjust and adapt. Yeah, exactly. And just find the balance to sort of enjoy my new journey, but still stay connected with my old one, if that makes sense. So my old writing and everything that I've sort of gotten so used to before having a child, alhamdulillah, and now sort of having this whole new beautiful but chaotic sort of journey where I can't really pinpoint, how to manage my time, or a checklist or a to-do list is non-existent. Like I cannot do that anymore. So I think it's literally all about adjusting and adapting.
Do you find like you changed your style of writing, ولا like your writing personality has changed since having a child, ولا قعدتي نفس الشخصية?
No, definitely my identity as a whole has changed, and I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing when it comes to motherhood. I think change is sort of attached to the definition of being a mother, but it's definitely sort of, I had to take a backseat from writing for a while. I mentioned in my new blog post that I've written recently, I sort of struggled for inspiration, but I wasn't, and I'm still not sure if that's sort of because I've just had a baby, or because it's, on my regular days before I was a mom, I've struggled for inspiration on normal days, on regular days. So I think it was, like I said, it's like a combination of factors. But yeah, some days, it's a strain, and I feel guilty for not being able to do everything at once. And that's when I know, I have to take a step back and just enjoy what I already have. I'd actually dedicated a new poem I'd written to my daughter.
I read that one.
This may be biased on my part, but it's definitely a favorite of mine. But so yeah, it's not necessarily that my inspiration sort of stopped, or my creativity took a pause, but it's just me finding the time to sort of be motivated and try to do everything I love whilst being with the ones I love. And yeah, inshallah it gets easier.
Inshallah. Yeah, that one is really, really beautiful. And you have a typewriter, right, as well, and then you just write it on there, and then طلع
Yeah,
الورقة
yeah.
بعدين. Because it
It just makes me feel like a real writer.
was finding a typewriter easy? Or was that
Oh, okay. So this is a whole story of having a typewriter. So I bought it literally years ago. I want to say I was like oh, I can't remember, but I was maybe like in my early teenage years, like 15, 16. And I just got it off eBay. Literally, I just bought it on a whim. I wasn't even particularly like a passionate writer back then. I was more into the aesthetic of it more than anything. So I got it and I was like, you know what, like maybe I'll use it, maybe I won't. But I just like the look of it essentially. And subhanAllah, it was literally the sort of, I think a couple of years after, I'd completely forgotten about the typewriter. And I think I had a project in school or college or something like that, where like sort of to do with like vintage writing and just basically building up my writing again. I had to sort of dig it out and I was like, you know what, this has to be a sign. So yeah, I've used it since just for drafts, and I found that actually using it like it puts me in a certain mental space and I'm actually inspired as I'm writing, even if it's just a draft and I end up scrapping it later on. Like it's very special for me.
what ink does it use? Like I'm actually very curious as to like
Okay,
how does everything come about in that typewriter?
so I use a typewriter, but I'm not like an expert
Right.
at like everything typewriter. But it does use a certain like a spool. So it's like a spool of ink that you just fit into so you open it up and you fit it into the typewriter, like two sort of disc shaped inks. And so as you type each letter, it just
Moves to the
yeah
side.
yeah exactly.
And then you
So
gotta push it back in.
yeah, so I had to like YouTube a whole tutorial on how to use it in the beginning, but yeah.
Where do you find the ink on eBay as well?
Yeah, most of the time on eBay, because I think the typewriter that I have is called an Erica. It's sort of a very, very dated one, and the specific model like doesn't take sort of any ink, so it's quite a graft trying to find it, but I think it's worth it. Yeah.
Definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Have you ever felt the lack of connection or the sense ان انت مش ليبية ولا عمرك حسيتي بايدنتي كرايسيس عشان like احنا ليبيين عايشين برا, we're part of the
Yes.
diaspora and we're also double شفرة like عايشين ما بين عالمين pretty much. Have you ever felt that way?
I think, yeah, like you said, most of us living abroad have felt the struggle at least once growing up. It's difficult feeling the alienation literally wherever you go. So either I'm not British enough or not Libyan enough in someone's eyes. But yeah, writing has helped me navigate my feelings of identity in the sense that I've sort of found the meaning of home to be very broad and interconnected. One poem I wrote like a while back that still sits quite heavy with me. If you don't mind, I'll just quickly read it to you. So to whom do I speak when my words are tied a little? My faith found a resting place, so my loss can soar to reach the sun. To where do I return when my healing starts and ends with yours? When my darkest days are a passing breeze that break your fall. So me writing that poem sort of, I think in that particular amount of time, it was like one summer, I was back home at the beach, just sort of reflecting, and it hit me that, with all the sort of, identity debates going on, it's home can literally mean more than one thing, and it's not necessarily that you're not cultured enough or you're not enlightened enough, because we can always build on that, we can always build on knowledge, but I think it's sort of important to remember that, you know, you are, as cheesy as it sounds, like we are our own home. So I think having you know, being Libyan and having a dual nationality is sort of a struggle in itself, but then having internal struggles as well as external struggles is always difficult to navigate.
While growing up, like like مثلا my parents at home, they're like عربي
Mm-hmm.
بس.
نفس الشيء.
How is it like for you?
Yeah.
نفس الشيء. Did they also tell you like لازم نتعلموا عاداتنا وتقاليدنا ولا they just let you be whoever you want?
I think a bit of both, to be honest. They were My parents are very Libyan in that sense, where, you know, they are sort of huge fans of tradition. They're always telling us stories of, especially my dad, of just like you know, him growing up, you know, his stories as a young boy, what they got up to. But I think sorry, I've lost my train of thought. What was the question?
Like, how was growing up in your
Okay.
household?
Yeah. So
Pretty much.
yeah, like I said, the Arabic language was instilled into us since a very young age. So that was that. But in terms of sort of, you know, always, you know, talk about tradition and sort of exercising that, it wasn't, it's not a large part of my childhood memory. Like I can't sort of remember. I can, you know, I can remember alhamdulillah having a good childhood, but not necessarily like a heavily Libyan one, if that makes sense. Not like not properly
Right.
culture based, but I also remember, you know, going back home, like would go every year and just sort of I'd experienced that for myself instead of my parents just, you know, just sort of talking about it. Yeah, exactly.
Telling you the story.
So yeah, I think, you know, having the Arabic language there was definitely important for me. I don't know how different it would have been if, you know, if my mom and dad were always sort of talking about tradition and we were always practicing it. There are definitely certain traditions that we would have sort of carried out, but, you know, like having Asida and Bazin, like that's definitely, it has to be a part of your childhood and adulthood as you grow up. But yeah, I think for me personally, you know, having the Arabic language, I think there, or like growing up with it, has proved very useful for me. And, you know, learning about my Libyan culture sort of came as I grew up. You know, the Arabic language has to be learned young, but growing up from that, like I could sort of learn about Libya and, you know, connect with my roots. So yeah.
Did you have many Libyan friends growing up?
Not that many. I think because we moved quite a lot when we were young, like from one city to city, just depending on my dad's work. But I can sort of recall a few, you know, being part of like halaqat and like mujtamaat and that kind of thing, like societies and stuff like that. You definitely like get to know people, and it was mostly sort of like my mum's friends, and then we'd sort of hang out with the kids, like yeah, so surprisingly we weren't as integrated as I would have liked maybe, but like I said, I've picked that up as I grew up, so I've learned, and I think that's what sort of caused my introverted personality a little bit. So not being sort of part of a wider Libyan community has maybe possibly led me to sort of channeling all that through my writing. And but alhamdulillah, as I grew older, I've learned to seek that for myself, and that's definitely developed my confidence.
So you felt closer writing, you felt closer to Libya and the Libyan community through your writing.
Exactly, yes.
Did you feel closer writing in Arabic, or did you feel closer writing in English?
That's a good question. Okay, so I think writing in English helped me because I've been so used to, you know, writing in English for a long time. even though I would sort of dabble in Arabic now and again, but because of, you know, going to an English school, etc., it's sort of what I've been practicing for longer than I have been in Arabic. But I think sort of writing in English and having my words sort of mapped out in front of me and knowing what I am going to write, you know, not having to spend hours on it, sort of made more sense to me. And that's what helped me feel more connected to Libya in a sense. I know it's very ironic, but it's because it came easy to me, writing in English about this certain topic. I was sort of able to express myself better. So I'd write a short passage in English, and then I'd sort of translate it into Arabic. But it still wouldn't do it justice. Like I'd have to write a whole separate Arabic poem, and it still wouldn't sort of sound as special to me because I'd sort of translated it from this English poem, and it was a very complicated process when I was writing about Libya because part of me did want to sort of express myself in Arabic, but I did struggle with it. So yeah, I think that's why it's also important, like, to sort of teach them young, as they say, like teach them the Arabic language and their culture young, because, you know, it gets more difficult as we grow older to stay connected.
That's the one thing that I'm grateful for. Alhamdulillah, like boy ummi, like the good thing is when you live abroad in an area where there's a lot of Libyans, تتعود على الكلام.
Yeah.
Like it becomes easier to learn to في مصطلحات تعلمتها like هلبة حاجات تعلمتها just from being around the Libyan community, whereas even if I learned Arabic, like I went to an Islamic school pretty much my entire life.
Yeah.
لكن وتعلمت الدين والقرآن, but I didn't learn Libyan culture and history, right?
Yeah.
The only way to learn that, it would be through my parents, but as well as, like, alhamdulillah, like even like after high school or during high school, actually grade 9, I didn't have Libyan friends. But then after that, like I moved and I had more Libyan friends growing up. It definitely was a blessing now that I look back at it, that my parents always instilled in me that we need to be a part of our community,
Yeah.
so that we don't lose sight of who we are. عشان احنا عايشين لبرا
Exactly.
مش ديما حتلقى واحد بنفس التفكير, you know, like we have Muslim friends, but like I've said on other episodes, like it's not the same.
Exactly. Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah.
Do you so you've tried many creative outlets, like you've written, like I've seen your writing about you painting and writing, and you've said it as well here.
Yeah.
So out of all the ones that you've tried, what's been the easiest for you?
I mean, not any of them were easy, but I mean, it takes, you know, a whole different process and mind space. But I've enjoyed creating, like you said, more visual versions of my writing in the past. So whether it's like, you know, painting or like video-based forms of art, and inshallah I hope to continue to do so. But I think my favorite, you know, will always be the written word. I know it's like, because it's my comfort zone, and even though it's never easy to break away from it, I've always liked to try new things. I'd always come back to, you know, writing on paper, but I think having my Instagram, you know, which I started quite recently, like in the last year or so, having that there and starting that up definitely opened me up to more opportunities. So that's when I was able to dabble more in like the visual aid. So, you know, I'd be able to, you know, paint my words or take videos, record my words, you know, do a bit of spoken word pieces. But yeah.
So do you feel like it's easier to integrate because you're so like you're so confident in what you're writing? Do you feel it's easier to integrate poetry into other forms of art?
I'd say so, yeah. I mean, it's not always sort of been an easy method. Like I said, I always end up going back to um you know, writing just as it is, as I started it. So as a draft, like I'd start writing on paper, I always end up going back to that. But I think having sort of my confidence develop over the years has definitely sort of made it easier and helped me out. Yeah.
And in your last week, if I'm not mistaken, you teased the project with a candle and some jewelry.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and how did that come about?
So not to share too much too soon, but inshallah, yeah. So this is a really exciting upcoming project I have. Inshallah, it'll be like a jewelry collaboration with a company called Zaiduri. They specialize in like garments, like clothing and, you know, jewelry accessories. And they just write. So they have a lot of it's very Arabic, you know, language based. So they'd have like Arabic names printed on their hoodies or printed on, you know, home accessories or, you know, accessories you wear. So it's, I think, having that collaboration and sort of reaching out and being able to connect with a company like that sort of was really special to me, because, you know, like I myself sort of work in a dual language on a dual language platform. So I think that sort of helped me like be more inspired and motivate me to write in Arabic more. But yeah, inshallah, I can't say too much about it now, but it's a very exciting project, inshallah.
Do you, because of this project, can we see you do more of such projects?
Hopefully, I'm working on a few ideas and projects right now. Obviously, whilst, you know, still having whilst having a baby, but it's everything took a backseat, like I said, because obviously, you know, being a mother
Pandemic and
yeah,
child.
and being a mother now comes first. So it's it's definitely been sort of a difficult past few months. But inshallah, I hope to, you know, get things back into motion soon, and you know,
Inshallah.
yeah, and work more on my Instagram feed and just share more and interact more with my readers, inshallah.
Because there's a poet, I forget his name, Mustafa the poet. He's Toronto based, like he's from Canada.
Yes,
I believe
I follow
he
him.
did
Yeah,
the Valentino. Yeah, he did the Valentino collection,
yeah,
uh, where he had spoken word on clothes,
yeah.
and it looked really cool. So
It's funny that you
maybe
mentioned
that.
him, actually, because he's probably been sort of, when I first started off my Instagram page, I hadn't really heard of him, but um so I followed him when I first started my Instagram page, just looking for poets and people to follow. And sort of reading his words, like, it struck something in me, like his word, like his poetry. It's not always sort of political, but he talks about people he loves, and he just you know, his community, and that sort of struck, like it hit home a little bit. And I think that's, he is like literally one of, you know, the few sort of out there artists who inspired me to, you know, start to build my own brand.
That's really cool because like he does a lot of things. Like mashallah, alayhi, he does a lot of things,
Yeah,
and I feel like as as an artist, it's very difficult to dabble in a lot of things because sometimes you're just stuck in your
exactly.
comfort zone.
And I think having you know, being stuck in the comfort zone comes with a lot of risks, because even though sometimes that is my personality and that's literally what I just want to stick to, it's important to have connections. Like, it's important to branch out and talk to people, and, you know, create that social circle where you know, you can build on your creative brand, or you can build on whatever you want to sort of venture into, because you know, that's the reality in today's climate. Like, you can't just expect things to be handed to you. And I think that's what I'm sort of slowly learning. Like, I can, you know, this isn't necessarily just for me, you know, to make money out of or whatever, because I started this with a whole other perspective. Like, I started this because doing something that I love, I just want to sort of spread a message, or make someone's day. But yeah, I think it's come to a time where, I'd love to sort of have that international reach. Like, I'd love for more people to read my work and just for it to resonate with them.
Like, yes, sometimes like it may seem that people are going for profit, but I also think it's that they're like, depending on how you do it,
Yeah,
you want to keep the same brand going, even if you're making money off of it.
exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, you're not really tarnishing your brand by doing it in any way, shape, or form.
Exactly. I think it's, yeah, like you said, it's not a bad idea. It's actually a clever one. It's a smart way of investing your time, and your interest to sort of have this more than a hobby. Like, it's sort of a good business mindset, if that makes sense.
Right.
So yeah.
So, last question. What is something you'd want to explain to others about yourself or about your work that would help them understand you or your poetry or your blog better?
So I mentioned this just now a little bit, but I think the key thing sort of for anyone who's reading to sort of take away from my writing is that I'm not always writing to spread a message. So whether it's a personal or political one, I do write about my culture, and I do enjoy it, and I write about, not necessarily always personal situations, but sometimes I like to reflect on them. But sometimes, my poems, I write my poetry with the hopes that it might, resonate with someone who's having a bad day, or to inspire like a budding writer who just really needed, that bit of inspiration or that bit of motivation to sort of pick up that pen and start writing. So yeah, I think that's the main thing that I'd like I'd like people to know, essentially.
Thank you very much, Amina. I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. My name is Zahruddin Treki, and this was episode 3 of season 2 of Kurna Tuhaf. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.